Yeah, and so the
So,
Gebser's
mhm,
magical structure, where those separations begin to occur. That's interrupt.
mm, right. And beta thinking then would be what maybe the first philosophers started to do, like Plato, just to take an example, maybe Pythagoras before him. Uh,
Mm.
they started to do beta thinking and realized that, wait, yeah, you're thinking about the motions of the planets in the sky, but you are also identical to those planetary motions. So you're participating with them in one cosmic process. And yet, still, it's difficult to overcome the sort of collective experience that we have of being separate from each other and the world around us. With beta thinking, we come to realize that actually that's got to be some kind of a temporary illusion, which you would hope as we continue to evolve would be overcome.
Mm.
Um, Not to be erased, but to be, to enter final participation is to be at one with everything on purpose instead of just naturally and instinctually, um, which I guess takes, it's not only an intellectual thing that you can understand how everything's one, it's also an act of will. And that seems to be the more difficult part. Um,
It's it reminds me of Iliad's call for our participation in the sacred as
mhm,
well. Um, and what's interesting about these figures, Barfield and Gebser, they speak about these structures of consciousness, but they don't necessarily tell us ways in which we might get there. And I think that's where templative discipline um,
yeah.
comes into play and must be utilized. And I think I mean, you have the whole history of yoga and all of those different paths. But call to action, I think, should be there. It's not just
Mhm.
the thinking about it. I mean, they're saying that we must move beyond thinking, but they're not giving us a way to do it, in a sense. So I
Yeah,
wanted to throw that out
that
there with you guys.
that reminds me a little bit of just Carl Jung's thoughts on this subject too, because in a way, I think he sort of offered a practice. What did he call it? The active imagination, or something like that, and how we
Right,
needed to
right.
Mhm.
reconnect with the imaginative, creative mind because it was a way into these processes. But the whole thing of separation from this, primordial unity and a return to it is also very archetypal, uh, in the sense that this kind of disconnect creates a thrust towards a stronger reunion. Like by forgetting, by falling asleep, when we awaken in our dreams, it's even more powerful. The lucid dream. So it's sort of like this cosmic force of separation and then reunion. And I think this is so interesting that and Jung talks so much about this too. Um, Maybe more so in the Red Book and his more private thoughts, because I know in public he was trying to be more scientific, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you talked about him being a closet mystic, which I
Yeah,
thought was a beautiful way of putting
I think he was a closet alchemist,
yeah, for sure.
hermeticist.
it.
The whole alchemy, the whole great work, it all ties into
Mhm.
this stuff. But
Mm.
yeah, so
Alchemical symbols are heavily
Yeah.
laden with mystery, and I think there's still a lot of understanding of it as a physical process of turning metal or whatever it is into gold. It's actually turning the metal of matter or the density of matter into spiritual gold,
mhm.
which the alchemists use in a very cryptic language, and there's this whole tradition in times of passing it back and forth, and I think after the Renaissance as well, of this alchemical literature, and they were all obsessed about the secrets of the great work and what it meant. Julius Evola has a really interesting book on this subject, which I forget the title now, but he basically exposes the secrets in a sense and reveals the symbolic meanings for what they actually mean. It's a fascinating work.
Yeah. I mean, what interests me about the alchemical tradition is the way in which they find spirit in matter, and you know, it's been sort of an underground, mystical, esoteric Western stream that's always been antagonistic to the church, but in fact, I would say interpreting the religious symbolism of Christianity in a far more living and practical way than any of the mainstream church figures are able to.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Alchemy really seems to be taking the whole idea of the incarnation further by saying, whatever the philosopher's stone is, it's one with nature, or it's that which provides the lost unity with nature, of the human with nature once again. I sort of also, some alchemists like Jacob Burma, or maybe, I don't know if you would call him an alchemist necessarily, but he was definitely influenced by it. He kind of had this understanding of the divine as needing to become embodied. And so there's no longer a transcendent God, but there's a God that is fully immanent in the world and in fact completed by the world through the evolutionary process.
Sounding like Teilhard.
Yeah, I think exactly.
Yeah. What was that line he said? To sublimate the earth, or to something like that. It always stuck with me. It's such a radical idea to popular religious thought. The kingdom of heaven is coming here, not the other. We're not going up there per se.
Right.
But there's still a climb to it, in that we have to prepare the earth for that transformation.
The mythical return of the golden age.
Mm-hmm.
Which it'd be fun to get into the antagonism and this seemingly different streams of thought of the eternal return, the four ages, the cycle of the four ages, and also reincarnation, and the contrast to the linear kind of straight up climb of spiritual evolution from some of the other figures that we're constantly climbing back and returning to source. If you guys want to roll on that.
That little paradox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I spent many a night pondering that one, actually.
Sleepless nights.
Whether or not it's ultimately, is it all just a circle ultimately, or going somewhere? Yeah. And I think I usually end up wanting to go somewhere. I usually end up wanting to think that there is actually novelty and creativity, and that every moment has never happened before. It's brand new. I think that's more, that sounds like a more enticing story to me, but I have to admit that I can't really be sure if it's really not all just going in a circle. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's some higher sense in which these aren't necessarily contradictory.
So maybe on the broader or more formal level, how do we talk about the perennial school, which really focuses on being, and at best it focuses on individual spiritual evolution, but they never really get to the collective spiritual evolution of figures like Teilhard and Barcode and Gebser? How do we converge being and becoming? How do we make these two schools that don't seem to get along together too well after Wilbur came in and basically tried to tear them apart and said they were regressive and this kind of thing? As far as I understand it, the whole neo-perennial business. I wanted to talk a little bit about that, what you guys think about that, and if you guys have read the Perennial Philosophy by Huxley or any of the traditionalist school of thought like René Guénon or Fritjof Schuon.
Sure.
I haven't read Guénon or Schuon, but I have read Huxley.